Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and we have our review for The Batman. Hey guys, well, today is Batman Day, and luckily I got to see the film on the night before. I have to say, I had a really good time, so I thought we could do a light spoiler review, I'm not going to give away big details, about the movie and what I really thought of what might be the new best Batman movie ever. Let's take a couple minutes to dive into the film, talk about all the elements of Gotham City, and what might be in store for the future of this new franchise. Despite Gotham looking so dark, it is pretty bright. Now, before we dive into it though, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. Also, the big giveaway. We're going to give away this Oculus Quest 2 at 50,000 subscribers. All you need to do to get in on our giveaway is be a subscriber and leave us a comment. Also, while you're at it, make sure you check out that free Week of Skillshare down below. It's a great place for you to develop all of your Batman skills for that never-ending war on crime, all while not diving too deep into your pockets. Plus, it really does help the channel, so we really appreciate it. Well, I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about this movie. Reviews really are not my thing, but I think we might have something a bit different and a bit unique on our hands for this movie. Now, The Batman was in production for a really long time, and has evolved quite a bit since its inception. As many of you remember, Ben Affleck was set to star and possibly direct this film several years ago. That's obviously changed, and the footprint of the DCEU also has completely changed since then. Now, Matt Reeves is quite the acclaimed director, and he does not disappoint in this movie. Now, it's not perfect. There are a couple things that I might have changed up, but overall, I do have to say, I think this is now the definitive Batman movie. On a broader scale, the best part about this movie is it brought an exciting new element of classic Batman to the screen, the detective. Which is something, if you're a Batman fan, we never really got a lot of in previous versions of the character, and was front and center throughout this whole movie. Now, there's a lot to like and a couple things to dislike, so let's break them into two different categories here. First and foremost, the castings for this movie are near perfect. Let's be clear, Robert Pattinson nails Batman. His presence, the look, the voice, everything is exactly as it should be. Now, for some people, his version of Bruce Wayne is a little emo, but as you go through the film, you start to realize this is an early, young Bruce Wayne who has not quite evolved into the superhero we know. That's actually a big part of this movie, and because of that, his version of Wayne works really well, even if he is a little brooding and a little emo. Now, Zoe Kravitz is now my favorite Catwoman. She pretty much is the best and most comic-accurate version of the character ever. There were some minor changes to her backstory involving her father, but I have to say, I loved how she was presented here, and she was a pretty believable character overall. Her motivations were clear, and Zoe Kravitz brought the character's pain to life, which was kind of key in making her work on screen. Now, one of the big surprises was Colin Farrell's Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin. Now, we already know the Penguin is getting his own spin-off series, and when you watch this performance, it'll really become pretty clear why. The Penguin isn't quite the supervillain we know from the comics yet, but he does evolve over the course of the movie and turns into something quite interesting. I also love how he kind of plays both sides of the character. He's a total mobster, but when cornered, he turns into the atypical criminal coward. Paul Dano's Riddler was also pretty great. But probably the one casting I had a couple of issues with. I really need to go back and see it again. His insanity is portrayed rather interesting, and when him and Batman have that confrontation, I have to say, it's really weird. But by the time we finish the movie, we really get an understanding of how crazy the character is, and it makes more sense, but at first it was a little off-putting, I have to say. One of the other great castings was Alfred, aka Andy Circus. Now, we didn't actually get as much of Alfred in this movie as I expected. There's kind of a tragic turn for him along the way, although I will reveal he does survive. The character himself is a more estranged version of Alfred than we've had in the past when watching Batman movies. But the relationship between him and Bruce grows throughout the movie, and you can pretty much feel the dedication from the butler in his acting performance, and it actually does work for me. I also liked how they portrayed Alfred as a rather smart guy with something in his past that hasn't been revealed, but definitely makes him formidable. And then finally, there's Jeffery Wright, who plays James Gordon. Now, throughout the movie, Jim Gordon is great, and I have to say, Jeffery Wright really does a good job bringing him to life. It's pretty much unlike any version of the character in the past. His friendship with Batman is absolutely evident. He is a dedicated, good man who's living in a Gotham swamp of desperation, crime, and misery. He really does portray the guy that believes in Batman, and even when those beliefs are challenged, you can actually see him fighting it. I loved every minute of the character. One of the other aspects of this movie that I absolutely thought was perfect was the character of Gotham City itself. Quite honestly, I've never seen a version of the movie where Gotham was brought to life more perfectly. You know, back in the days when Tim Burton really did that goth version of Gotham, a lot of people felt like it was pretty much the new staple. I have to say, it's not. This version works so much better. The location filming in Scotland completely worked, and it felt like an old Gotham City that was just falling apart everywhere you look. Gotham really was a dump, completely overrun by crime and the misery we had mentioned before. And finally, one of the other aspects that I liked of this movie was simply the Batman mythology. The film opens with quite a few scenes from the trailer, and this is really the first time you've ever seen criminals who fear the Batman. As many of you know, he's only been at work for about 2 years, and the criminals of the streets of Gotham City are terrified of Batman. We dove into this a little bit in the Nolan series, but I have to say, it's front and center here, and criminals are genuinely afraid of the Dark Knight. This is something I really loved, and the movie sees him evolve a little bit into more a hero, but I hope they keep this aspect in future sequels. Now, there's only a handful of things that I thought were on the downside. We've already mentioned how Bruce Wayne is a little emo for some people's liking, but for me, it wasn't a total downer, but it did get rather annoying during some periods of the movie. The movie is also really long, about 3 hours, and there were a couple points where I have to say it did really slow down. Now, it was story-driven, so you have to have patience for those segments to play out. But this, unlike a lot of other superhero-type movies, wasn't leaning on action to fill those holes. And that's probably one of the other, not negative, but things that were not quite perfect. Most Batman and superhero-type movies are out-and-out action pieces. This really wasn't that. It's not that the movie didn't have some great action scenes. We get a lot of Batman pummeling various criminals, some great car and motorcycle chases, and overall the finale of the film was really pretty darn good. But the movie didn't lean on that action too heavily, which is something that many Batman movies have done in the past, and many fans might be expecting for this one. Now, I can't say for sure this is now my favorite Batman movie ever. I have to go see it again. For me, the real value in films is when you rewatch them and you're just as entertained. That's really the staple of a great movie, and as of right now, I really think this one is going to qualify as that. I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. No movie is ever perfect, and there were a couple of things that could be improved, but I actually think Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves have somewhat of a Batman masterpiece here, and it's going to be remembered for a really long time as a definitive interpretation of the classic DC character. So, what did you guys think of The Batman? And do you think you need to see it again to fully digest the film and figure out where it fits in the echelon of Batman movies? I think for any great movie, it's almost a requirement. Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you press like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you ain't getting any updates. Peace.